Hello and welcome to Additive Insight, the original additive manufacturing podcast, and your source for news, interviews and comment on the latest 3D printing and AM intelligence, brought to you by TCT Magazine. I'm your host Sam Davis, and today I'm joined by Alex Hickson and Matt Bailey of the Aerospace Technology Institute. Hickson and Bailey are both part of the ATI Structures, Manufacturing and Materials team, with Hickson serving as Head of Technology and Bailey as a Lead Technologist. Through their roles, Hickson and Bailey have contributed to the development of additive manufacturing and wider technology strategies that seek to support the adoption and application of advanced design and manufacturing techniques. As they join the Additive Insight podcast, the pair provide their perspective on the challenges and opportunities around AM implementation in civil aerospace, while sharing the progress made since the release of its AM strategy in 2024. We also discuss what will be needed to meet net zero targets by 2050 and how those in industry can support the organisation moving forward. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also head over to tctmagazine.com to subscribe to the TCT membership platform and receive more Additive Insight via our print and digital offerings. Alex, Matt, welcome to the Additive Insight podcast. We're going to talk today about the ATI's additive manufacturing and wider technology strategies. But first, could you explain what the motivation of the Aerospace Technology Institute is and how it works with industry to achieve its goals?
Thanks for having us today. So the mission of the ATI is transforming aerospace through technology and innovation. Our vision is aerospace is an engine for sustainable economic growth, and we believe that the UK can double its market value in civil aerospace to $18 billion by 2035. So we're here to strengthen the UK competitiveness, increase content on the next generation aircraft, and reduce the aerospace environmental impact through innovation. So we do this firstly by defining the UK civil aerospace technology strategy, of which we have an updated version, which is being published in the coming months. And then we help deliver that through funding technology development through the ATI program.
Okay, and how would you assess the current civil aerospace landscape in the UK? What works and where can improvements be made?
So UK has historical strengths in major wing aircraft components. So almost all of Airbus wings are manufactured in the UK. Rolls-Royce is a global leader in wide-body aircraft engines, with both of them having established supply chains that support these organisations. So wings and engines we see represent the most significant technology levers for improving efficiency and reducing emissions, meaning the UK has a key role to play in realising a new generation of ultra-efficient aircraft. So with the support of the ATI, the UK is a hotspot for aerospace innovation, with disruptive new technologies being developed, such as batteries by Vertical Aerospace and hydrogen with ZeroAvia. Matt, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, sure. Where's the UK doing well? Where can improvements be made? So, as Alex said, there's a historical strength there in terms of the major organisations, but there's absolutely an opportunity to strengthen the supply chain, especially in the face of international competition and aerospace being a global market. We're thinking about how we support those organisations, and Alex has already made reference to the ATI funding program. We have a specific program for small and medium enterprises, and I think generally we're seeing levels of innovation, and even in additive manufacturing there are organisations that we see in the UK that are being very strong, that have spun out. Examples like Alloyd spun out of University of Oxford. They've got really strong skills in material development into additive processing. They're benefiting from ATI funding to help them grow and develop. So we've got some really strong examples in technologies like additive, but we've also got an established supply chain that we need to support. And I guess really the other bit is we can't rely on that history. Yes, it's great that Airbus and Rolls are here and their supply chains, but we need to keep investing in technology to remain competitive in this global market. So we need to meet the production rates of future aircraft. We need to make sure that the quality of those components is there. We need to reduce the cost. Again, thinking about how we can remain competitive. And I say all of this really, in terms of the ATI program, very much aligned and very much part of the UK government's overall modern industrial strategy. So the ATI funding programs secured out to 2035 as part of announcements that were made in support of that program last year.
Yeah, additive manufacturing, as you touched on there, is one of the areas that ATI has been looking into in recent years, and I think would be fair to say in the UK one of the areas that has been marked for improvement in civil aerospace. I think when ATI was putting together its AM strategy a couple of years back, it counted fewer than 10 distinctive metal AM civil aircraft part numbers in active use, and concluded that the UK is lagging behind international competitors. What is your understanding of why that is?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a bit of an eye opener when we were going through the the consultation that helped us develop that strategy. We could attribute less than 10 part numbers, and majority of them seem to be going through one organization. I think there's definitely been some stuff that's changed since then, and I think there's stuff on the horizon that's going to hopefully mean that we're moving in the right direction. But I think the reasons for it are a little bit multifaceted. I couldn't say that there's one distinct reason. There's definitely challenges around the breadth of the UK supply chain. So today there's not necessarily a UK supply chain in AM that can deliver completely from end to end. And that's partly what we're going to try and address through the strategy, how we can grow and strengthen that. But equally there's while there might be an appetite to invest in that supply chain, there's not necessarily the strength and that clear demand signal from the big players, from your original equipment manufacturers, your OEMs, your tier ones, to justify investing in the supply chain at the moment. So it's still a bit of a difficult situation. I guess one of the other things, historically in aerospace, it can be a bit of a challenge to change manufacturing processes once things are established. And the reality is we haven't really had new aircraft programs in the last 10, 15 years. A350, 787, probably the last things that really came along. Without those new programs, you haven't got that clean sheet design that enables you to adopt some of these new technologies, and so you have a difficult job to get. You got to fit those non-recurring costs to develop that new process and to qualify it, and you've got to have a business case that's going to pay you back in in a relatively short period of time. And without that clean sheet design, it's very challenging. That's not to say that there hasn't been success, and like I said, there's stuff where we've seen, in terms of Airbus for obsolescence, they've had real examples where additives made sense, and equally things like the Rolls-Royce Pearl engine for business jets. There's an opportunity there, and there's manufacturing happening in the UK in additive. So there's definitely stuff moving in the right direction. Clearly there's international competitors that have made significant investments in this field in recent years, and GE would be probably one of the leading lights there, and there's the number of part numbers that they're talking about potentially in the sort of the latest generation engines is quite significant, and it's something we want to aspire to and to sort of grow that UK capability. So that's what we've tried to do with the roadmaps and the strategy. We've tried to lay out what that route is to building that capability to be able to to capture more of those opportunities for AM, and and say it's all about getting the technology to the right maturity, so that when hopefully future aircraft programs come along, then the technology is mature, ready, and then the supply chain's there to be able to deliver as well.
At a high level, in the strategy, I think the suggested solution, or one of the suggested solutions, was to synchronize technology development with the product decisions that the key industry stakeholders are expected to take by 2028. So can we dig into that a little bit more? What does that look like, and how do you suppose that closer collaboration between those stakeholders will support AM implementation?
One of the key reasons for creating the roadmap and the strategy was really to get an aligned view of the sector. There's a lot of people saying technology wasn't going to be industrialized because of various blockers, but people weren't necessarily aligned on that. So firstly was to get an aligned view around what was required, and an agreement around the priorities, and an agreement between those entities to go and do something about it. So that group that came together for that, which is running now in the community of practice, is a route to helping deliver on the roadmaps. What we've worked to do in working with the RTOs, industry and academia, is trying to minimize duplication, alignment on the sense of direction, the priorities, help share best practices and make things more efficient in how things are done, but also then help build collaborations. So agreeing areas where organizations don't feel they need to be competitive in, they're some of the fundamentals that need to be there in terms of capability and capacity in the supply chain. So they've got options to go out to tender, because as we know, the big organizations want to ensure program delivery, product delivery, the services to their end customers. So they want to make sure they de-risk the supply chain and that they're suitably capable. So making sure there are good options, but they're robust supply chain options, is quite key. So moving out of the R&T domain into industrial capability is really important. We also then need to make sure we're working with them to create clear demand signals that can support the investment that industry needs to make in order to have the capability and capacity there for these future programs. So making sure that those messages are clear to the end customers, so that they're enabling the creation of the capability and the investment to deliver the capabilities they're after. But working collectively, we can sort of standardize these practices, develop the appropriate standards, improve the quality, grow the confidence in the various technologies, because this isn't one technology suits all. There are various different technologies being developed for different applications, and making sure that the right investments are happening for those future aircraft, both industry and government investments that are focused in the right areas on the right applications to make an impact, and basically dislodging some of the myth that AM is the solution to all things. There's still the right material and process for the application, but AM definitely has the niche areas where it really works and can make a substantial difference to the sector and the performance of future aircraft.
And in the strategy, there's reference to 2028. So there's decisions that these stakeholders are expected to make within the next couple of years. Can you just contextualize the reference to 2028? What do we expect to happen between now and then?
So much of this is about the link to the aircraft development timescales. So no one's knows exactly when they're going to launch. This is about being ready such that when the new large aircraft programs launch, the technologies are suitably mature such that the aircraft designers can select them, and the procurement organizations feel as though there's capability that could deliver them when those products are sort of designed using those technologies. So that's really the key thing. We feel as though the technologies need to be mature in the order of 28, 29. That that could slip a bit, but if they're around that time, we feel as though they should be well placed, and the UK organisations will be well placed for the launch of potentially a future A320 or 737 family aircraft.
Just to echo what Alex is saying, aircraft developments take a long time. 5 to 7 years, even more if you think about all of it. And so, it's about having the technology at the right maturity when those key design decisions are made, so that it can buy its way onto those aircraft and into those designs. So that's the urgency. That's the reason for that. All the progress between now and the end of the decade to make sure everything is in the right place, because otherwise it's in danger of missing a generation of aircraft. And those notional aircraft that could replace an A320 or a 737, there's the potential to be building hundreds of those per month. That's a fantastic economic opportunity that we don't want to miss out for this technology. So we need to make sure it's mature and ready between now and the end of the decade.
It's also maybe just building off the successes and demand and pull in other sectors. It would be defence, space, oil and gas, are extensively using AM and building up that kind of credibility of the technology and the supply chain footprint that aerospace can benefit from. But it offers a very much increased scale, typically from the products that are being made today in those sectors.
The strategy was released about 18 months ago, I think, as we record in early April. So what are you able to tell us about the kind of ongoing initiatives and projects that have commenced since the strategy? What does the kind of roadmap look like as we have those targets towards the end of the decade? What activity is currently taking place?
Sure, yeah. So the strategy was born out of something called the Additive Manufacturing Community Practice that Alex has already sort of mentioned. So that's a group that we've convened alongside our colleagues in the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. And that was about bringing together the key industrial end users of additive. So, typically your aerospace OEMs and tier ones, bringing them together into a forum and basically trying to get them to work together to minimize that duplication, to collaborate and to try and overcome some of these barriers to adoption. So we created the strategy because actually we said, well, what's the target of this group? What's the focus? We consulted with a wider set of industrials, but we basically created the strategy and said, well, this group, we're going to go and deliver this strategy. So that's why we created it. It's the mission that we've got with this group to drive forward and to try and and basically deliver between now and the end of the decade. So that group keeps going. We keep meeting. The next meeting is coming up imminently, and we're meeting regularly throughout the year. What we've been doing at the moment is really trying to drill down into some of those areas where there is that, I guess, a non-competitive aspect, the fundamental enablers where we can do the collaboration, where we can try to minimize that duplication. And so we've got some different areas at the moment where we're sort of really trying to get to the bottom of where we can work together. So we're thinking about how do we make larger parts, and that's both as powder bed fusion processes but also DED. A lot of interest in how do we scale to bigger and bigger parts. Metrology, non-destructive testing, and then and how do we really realize in process monitoring to again minimize how much of that NDT and sort of inspection we have to do. So absolutely another key theme. And then the other bit, post-processing, everything else you got to do. So, well, okay, your depowdering, your or whatever it is, your machining, heat treatment. How do we minimize? How do we optimize there? So, things that benefit everyone, but aren't necessarily a real competitive area. So that's where we're focusing. As I say, we're convening wider experts at the moment, and to get their input to get to the bottom of exactly where we're going to work together. Some of that might come into our program at some point in terms of collaborative projects. Some of it just might be about convening forums of people more broadly. So we'll get into the bottom of what that looks like, but absolutely we continue to drive forward on that. And equally, the ATI funding programs have continued to see sort of healthy levels of demand, and we've got large programs of work coming through significantly, significant amounts of funding there, strongly aligned with what we set out to do. And that's both, larger players, but equally there's a really healthy level of smaller organizations and, and innovative organizations getting involved there too.
To produce a strategy like this, there's obviously a belief in the potential of AM. So what are the opportunities for the technology have you seen in the civil aerospace sector? I think it might have been easy to look at the 10 part numbers from a few years ago and kind of think, oh, maybe there's not too much potential in this technology, but obviously you guys and your partners see that there is. So what are the big opportunities do you guys think for the technology?
So AM obviously really does enable some things to be manufactured that couldn't be manufactured by other means. So we've seen examples in the ATI strategy documents, whereas cooling efficiency can't be achieved by other technologies that AM can deliver. So kind of conventional methods are definitely superseded by what AM can deliver. However, it's very much about finding the right application. It was sold at in the early days in aerospace as a solution that could solve everything. Very much, you could get much reduced buy-to-fly ratios, so more effective use of material, needing to buy less material, creating less machining, less swarf. So lower energy to make a part. But when you start looking at the business cases, and I did in my previous role in industry, there's some areas where the cost of the powder in comparison to getting forgings in meant the business case didn't work in every scenario. So it was about finding the areas that it did work. Obviously, the experience that the aerospace sector had over a period of time, it's been looking into this more and working out in the areas that it does work. And sometimes it can be even just the yield of the conventional process that's made today, and in comparison with making it via AM, which is in many cases a fairly robust processing route, the business case can work. So there's a lot better understanding around that now. It's one of the areas that's certainly being looked at as an alternative to the casting and forging supply chains, which are established, but seeing various challenges over the time. So historically, these areas where some of the products can have been challenging, and AM in some cases even reducing, say, the complexity of castings, that mean the casting yield goes up and the cost goes down, and then additive manufacturing is used as part of a hybrid process for making the part. So it's very much about finding where it really works, but we're seeing more and more cases where it's being explored, and then it's about working out what the right process is, and then who the right people are to partner with to go and make the part that meets their sort of material and performance requirements.
Since publishing the AM strategy in September 24, what has the response been from industry? What kind of feedback have you had from the industrial players that you'll rely on in a lot of ways to kind of turn the strategy into a reality? What has their kind of impression been of the strategy you've mapped out?
So we've definitely continued to have their really strong support in our community of practice. So we've still got really good engagement. We can fill the room with all of the key stakeholders. So everyone's bought into it. And actually, I think, as I say, we talk about maybe the 10 parts is quite a stark example, but actually behind the scenes, and maybe it's not quite made the light of day, there is a momentum gathering. So we've started to see investments in capability, for both R&D, but equally for production. So stuff is happening. People are investing in the UK and there are some really promising, applications on the horizon in terms of where people might be able to apply it that could be quite transformational. And I mentioned earlier that, we've seen new projects coming in. There's a couple of, really key ones. So there's two that I can talk about. One of them is being led by Airbus. It's a program called DEXAM, which is digitally enabled competitive and sustainable AM. And there's another project called Strata that's led by Honeywell, and that's state-of-the-art technologies revolutionizing additive manufacturing through artificial intelligence for greener aerospace applications. Really rolls off the tongue, that one, but we'll keep it to Strata. But those two projects represent 52 million pounds worth of R&D work. We're supporting that with about 30 million pounds of grants, so that's quite a significant investment, and that's fully aligned with the objectives of our strategy. And like I said, it's driven by the big players, so you've got Airbus and GKN really driving the sort of DEXAM, but it's got really strong engagement with loads of innovators. So you've got companies like Domin, which have been doing a fantastic job in industrializing AM in other sectors, and let's bring that into aerospace. Additive Manufacturing Solutions, ToffeeX, Apex Additive, Orthentai. So innovators in there working alongside major players. Equally, we've got in that Strata project, the Honeywell one, we've got Beyond Math, we've got QDOT, we've got 3T. So again, supply chain organizations, smaller players, innovators coming along and doing new stuff, driving it forward. But like I say, it's a significant amount of investment. Equally, I mentioned our SME program earlier. We've got a load of companies coming through that. You've got Alloyd, Forge 3D, Nexus Additive, Theta Technologies, QDOT. There's lots of companies innovating, doing stuff in this space. Really healthy levels of work going on. So for us, it's a positive, and citations of the strategy throughout all of these applications, I think is a really positive sign. As I say, just working in the background, trying to keep the community practice going. But as I say, I think we've seen a response in terms of what we're coming into our program, but equally, as I say, an appetite to continue to drive it forward.
Obviously, ATI's scope goes beyond AM, and this year the organisation is going to be publishing an updated technology strategy. At this stage, I appreciate it, I don't think, at least it's been published just yet as we record this. What are you able to tell us about the key targets of this updated strategy?
So this is really a chance for us to reflect on how the industry has changed since the publication of our last strategy back in 2022. So firstly, underline aerospace's role as an engine for sustainable economic growth, aligned with the current government. We're also looking at how we provide an update on the global aviation growth forecasts and how the UK can capture its share of this growing market. We reflect the progress since the 2022 roadmaps and our update on technology expectations, reflecting on what's been delivered within the portfolio. Where do we see as a focus going forwards? We've put an increased focus on industrial competitiveness, especially given the prevailing geopolitical situation, and thinking about what kind of capabilities the UK wants to establish as part of having sovereign manufacturing design test capability to support its ambitions. All these areas, though present in the current ATI strategy, present an opportunity for additive manufacturing, and we'd certainly love to come back and talk once it's published.
Across both strategies, I think, and you touched on it a little there. There's the mention of Destination Zero, the target of achieving net zero by 2050. How challenging is that going to be for the aerospace sector, and I guess what will be key to achieving that target?
I mean, aerospace is probably one of the most difficult sectors to decarbonize. There's not going to be one solution that is going to solve all of the problems. It's going to be a whole portfolio of different technologies and different aspects. So yes, the technology aspect that we can really get behind and support, but equally we need to think about the fuels that go into it, sustainable aviation fuels, alternative fuels in the future, how the aircraft operates in the sky, air traffic control, air traffic management, and other stuff in other sectors. So there's been a lot of press around what's the future for hydrogen. So Airbus had some announcements last year that moved things to the right. Ultimately, hydrogen is a means to delivering sort of true zero aviation. It is zero emission at tailpipe. We're very much still working on that. We're still very much funding technologies that are going to help enable that. It's fundamentally it's the way to address it, but as I said, there's other means and other levers we can pull on the way. More and more there's how do we electrify flight more? How do we hybridize that into the propulsion system? So there's different ways that we can drive efficiency. We can also we're looking at how the aerodynamics of that the aircraft can be improved, etc. But additive's going to play a role in here. Additive's going to be really critical in driving that. It enables, as we've already said, part designs unmanufacturable by any other means. So it means that we can get greater efficiencies through novel designs. So to deal with the the additional heat associated with those hybrid and electric powertrains, how we can think of novel geometries and shapes. So, and again, equally actually to how we just reduce weight in some of these parts, because that's absolutely key in reducing the amount of fuel that you're consuming. So yeah, we need to develop technologies across the board. We need to be thinking about those. It's not going to be an easy journey. It's not going to be a quick journey, but we need to keep investing. We need to keep making those incremental improvements in the short term to drive up the efficiency of the aircraft. But we also need to have that longer term view on how we look at different fuels, etc. And ultimately deliver. But it's absolutely still our target. Yes, we need to think about the economics and we need to drive forward the economic benefits, but we need to decarbonize the sector as well.
We spent most of the conversation today talking about the AM and technology strategies that the ATI publishes and looks to implement. Beyond setting those strategies, how does the organisation support manufacturers in the aerospace sector? What else do you guys do to kind of help them do their jobs essentially?
Sure. So I guess the main lever we've got available to us is the funding program. So that's currently secured out to 2035. That's worth £2.3 billion in terms of the amount of grant that's available between last year and through to 2035. So that's a significant amount of money that's available to the sector, and we've got the funding programs, both the strategic one for those bigger projects, but equally that SME program to help support smaller players. In terms of what we do beyond that, well, we're very active. We run lots and lots of events. We have our flagship ATI conference, which typically happens in November each year. We have other events. We have showcases for specific technologies. We've not done one necessarily on additive yet, but we've done ones on composites, on automation technologies, on some of those hydrogen enabling technologies too. And we also have boot camp events for people that are just not necessarily familiar with everything in the sector. So helping give them the direction, helping them with the resources that are available out there, and giving that guidance. So we've got plenty of events that we're running. We're trying to be out there, open and engaged. We've got working groups that we can convene. We've got a network of people that are advising us, and that drives and steers where we go and what we do. And there's plenty of stuff on our website. So the AM strategy is one report that's on there, but equally there are others for other technologies. There's other publications and things that can be referred to, and hopefully we're trying to give an impartial and a balanced view to the sector that people can use to sort of determine and drive their strategies. There are other resources. We've got an ATI toolkit that's got modeling capabilities there, so both for understanding the market and the market potential of different parts, but also if you want to look at the implications of technology to aircraft performance. So if I reduce my part weight by a kilo here, what does that really mean? So we've got the tools that can show what those benefits are and give you answers there. But equally, we're engaged in the wider ecosystem. We work with organizations such as the Aerospace Growth Partnership, trying to drive forward the aerospace sector and support. We're there, we're part of the ecosystem, and trying to support as best we can.
My last question, and thank you both for taking the time today. We covered there how the ATI helps manufacturers. How can those manufacturers and the key industry stakeholders help you? What further support would you like to make progress towards the goals and the objectives that we've discussed today?
Well, firstly, building off the successes that we've had to date is ongoing and very highly appreciated support that we get from industry. I think they recognize the unique position we have to see what's going on across the sector and more broadly, to provide them strategic guidance, but we're very much relying on their insight, their openness, their sharing, but also their open-mindedness to understanding and the approach that we've taken to address some of the gaps, to collaborating, to working with us to address these things. Also, in terms of informing where things are prioritized, recognizing that funding's not limitless. We need to make sure we're working on the right things that will deliver the right impact. There are make-buy decisions to be made. What are the things that we really need to focus on in the UK versus what can they go and potentially acquire from the supply chain, or they've got working through R&D in other countries, for example. So making sure the UK is well positioned on the things it does. Finance is quite key. So how do we make sure we're getting the support of investment and linking up organizations with route to getting funding, whether it be earlier TRL activity or post-project investment, so linking with government, National Wealth Fund, British Business Bank example. We've done a lot as well to support, just in terms of support for smaller organizations that have helped them get funding through sort of their investments. We also then work to sort of help try and addressing supply chain gaps. So that might be where we recognize there's smaller businesses that we could grow to fill gaps that can credibly do that, and getting steering from the primes end customers as what is it they need to see, what kind of things do they need to deliver in terms of whether it be aerospace standards, revenues, in order to be in a position to win future work, as well as where are there gaps that we're just not going to address by that means, and where do we work with government in the ecosystem to help get inward investment, with credible organizations with technology offerings that the end customers really want, and helping build collaborations there that create real credible opportunities for UK manufacturing jobs through the R&T and using the ecosystem that exists here today, because we're definitely seen as world leading in a number of areas of technology. So we need to sell that, we need to build that, and hopefully in the years to come we'll see the results of those investments and the opportunities for the UK winning some of that work on future programs.